Welcome to the training webinar for today. I am Dale Franks, and today we are going to talk about business values, and we are going to cover all of the 4 different types of business values. And we're going to start off with SQL business values because I think that's the most important one, and that is the one that we should address first, and it may take the longest, although REST business values will also take up a fair amount of time today. So let's start off with SQL business values. There have been some changes to Process Director and to the editor for SQL business values. So if you have an older version of Process Director, you're going to see some stuff that you don't have. And if you have, well, pretty much one of the 2, I think, newest versions of Process Director, you'll see the Monaco editor. So let's go back and start from scratch. To run a SQL business value, you're going to need 2 things. You're first of all going to need, well, the business value itself, what am I trying to say? You need 2 things. One is a data source that is accessible from Process Director. If you're a cloud customer, you may not have such access. Obviously, if you're an on-premise customer, you should have access to any data source that exists inside your network. So if you're running a SQL Server database or 2 inside your network, you should have access to all of that. If you are not a on-premise customer, you're a cloud customer, that becomes a little bit more difficult. One of the things that you can do, and our recommended way of doing it, is to import a export of your internal database, whatever it is, do an export into Excel, and then you can bring that data into Excel. So you have to have the data source, and then of course you have to have the data source object that connects to it. So for this demonstration today, our data source is going to be SQL Server, but we're using Excel as the base data source. So I have this Excel file right here. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. You know what? I've already downloaded it. I don't have to download it again. I should have it right there so that we can open it up in Excel. If you have multiple tables in your database, the easiest thing to do is to import them in a single spreadsheet that has multiple worksheets in the Excel file. So in this example, I have 2 worksheets. I have a worksheet called Sample Items Category and a worksheet called Sample Items. So these are 2 related tables. The Sample Items Category is the parent table, which gives me a category of items, which we'll see in the form. We'll be able to pick a category. And then the sample items are the items contained in each of the category. The Sample Items Category has a category ID, and each of the sample items, well, they have their own IDs, but they also have a column that links them to the category ID. So every item on the Sample Items worksheet is essentially linked via the cat ID column to the category ID on the other spreadsheet. Now, it may be that your data is unrelated, and so that doesn't really matter to you. But if your data is related, this is one of the best ways to get it in via Excel. Obviously, if you are accessing your database directly, those relationships should already exist and you don't have to worry about it. But if you're exporting into Excel and then importing into Excel, then you can export all of the related tables into a single spreadsheet, and they will just be in separate worksheets inside the Excel file. And as long as your foreign keys to the from the child table up to the parent table match the primary keys of your parent table, then you are good to go. The relationships, while not formally existing whenever you import the Excel spreadsheet, they will effectively exist because you can still use the value of the category ID to filter. Let's put a pin in that word filter because that is extremely important. And we'll discuss that a bit later when we look at the form. So this is my base data. In this case, it's Excel. Now, for an Excel file, Excel files can be imported directly into the internal user database of Process Director. Of course, to do that, you need the actual data source that points to it. So that is our destination data source, and this is the name of it from the title of the webinar that I did all the way back in 2020. Now, let's take a look at our data source because that's an important piece of this, because whether you are looking at a data source inside your network, like an actual SQL Server database, or you are importing the data into the internal user database, either way, you are going to need a data source object to make that data connection to the appropriate database, whatever it is. Now, whenever you use an Excel file and that Excel file imports it into the internal user database, that's a SQL Server database. You now have direct access to all of that data via SQL Server, which is why we're using a SQL business value to pull that data, because it is actually SQL data once you pull it. The nice thing about the Excel data is that once you have the data in Excel, you can always just check out the Excel file, edit it, and check it back in. So if we go back to our Excel file, and to go back to it, let's just open it. I have all of these items. So let's just add an item. And I'll make up an item number. And what will we do here? What will we call this? We'll call this a cubicle desk. And we'll say that that cubicle desk costs $249.95. And the category ID, since this is office equipment, we're just going to give it a category ID of 2. And that category ID of 2 will, of course, match the office item category. Okay, great. So I've made this edit to the file. So this is brand new. The cubicle desk is a brand new item. It does not yet exist in the database. So I'm going to go ahead and close and save my Excel file. And before we go any further, let's go into our SQL Business Values folder, and let's just open the SQL data form and run it. And we're going to select Office as the category. And then in our items, well, we've got a cubicle wall, Diet Coke, office chair, and paper boxes, but our new item doesn't exist yet. Okay, well, that's fine. We can make it exist because all we have to do is go to our Excel file, go to the Edit tab, check it out, and since I have already made the correction to this document and I have saved and closed it, I am good to go. I have things open that I don't want to open, so let me close that. I'm just going to go, now that I've checked it out, all I have to do now, since I've already made the edit to the file, is just go here, grab this file, upload the new version, and look here at the top. The new document has been checked in. Auto Excel DB imported successfully. So on the Import Database tab, we have our data source, we have our destination data prefix, and we have it set up to automatically import this Excel file after every check-in or import. So we are good to go. What should happen once we close this and we go back to our form, I should be able to just change the category real quick from office to something else and then back to office. And right there is my cubicle desk with its new item number and its price already placed in there. So I can just update that Excel file, and or I can just get a fresh export from my database and replace the Excel file. Either way, that import happens automatically and the data goes straight into SQL. So when we look at our form, I probably should have kept that open. We're doing a couple of things. We have this drop down here that is showing me my categories. So if I pick, we'll pick outdoor equipment this time. I have a second drop down that shows me the names, so I can pick those names. And when I pick a name for an item in the drop down, I get these two fields filled automatically. So I'm doing two things with my data sources. Let's take a look at what I am doing with them. First, let's take a look at the categories data source. So we have the name here. We have our group and value picker. The group and value picker is always important. I always stress that because it really helps whenever you are choosing your business value to have the menu in the choose system variable dialog box to group similar business values together in the same group. It simply makes them a lot easier to find than having this big long list of business values with no group names. So group names are very convenient and very helpful to set up for your business values. Now, there are 4 different types of business values that we're going to talk about today: the REST data source, the form instances, the knowledge view data source, and the SQL data source, which is what we're looking at now. So to configure our SQL data source, we just need a couple of things. First, we need to choose the data source that we're going to use. This is the same data source that we use to import our Excel file. This is generally going to be your internal user data source. I, in fact, have one, I believe. Generally, a data source like this is not stored alongside your project. It's stored alongside the application here because it needs to be exportable in case anybody wants to see the sample objects that I've created and be able to use them. But in general, that is not where your data source is going to be. In general, you should have a data sources folder at the root level of your partition. At BP Logix, the convention we use for these types of global files is to place them inside square brackets. So custom tasks, which you should all be familiar with, those are named in square brackets. I've just named my data sources in square brackets here. And as you can see, I have several data sources, including my internal DB, which is just the process director specific tables. And then I have my internal user DB, which I've also added the word global for some reason. This is essentially the same data source as my webinar 2020-09-24 data source. They do exactly the same thing. Normally, I wouldn't need to do that. I wouldn't need to have multiple data sources that are all pointed to the same internal data source. In this case, the internal user database. So rather than just creating data sources willy-nilly like I've done down here to place inside the application folder, I normally wouldn't do that. Normally, if I was building a real application, what I would use would be the data source that is stored up here at the root level of my partition in the data sources folder. I would just grab that internal user DB global data source, and that would be my data source for everything inside the internal user database. I only need it once, plus if I have this data source with the same name in this data sources folder, both on my dev and production server or my stage and production server, actually you would do it in all 3, Then when I import an application, so if I wanted to import this SQL Business Values application, it would automatically look up here in the data sources folder for my internal user DB Global. It would find it and it would just import between all three systems without any issue. The same thing applies if you have a regular SQL data source that is actually pointing to a database. So let's say that you're on premise and you have a test database that is on SQL Server somewhere, and then you have a production database. Well, on your dev and staging systems, you would still have that database. Let us say that it is SQL data source. So this is looking at a SQL database. So it is named SQL data source. So on my dev, stage, and production server, I would have a SQL data source that hooks up to a SQL database, but not necessarily the same SQL database. On my dev and staging server, this SQL data source, and it's not actually connected to anything. It's actually connected to the internal user database. But let's set it to SQL just for, not MySQL. Where is SQL Server? It's somewhere here. There it is, SQL Server. So I would have a provider, which for SQL would be system.data.SQL client. That would be universal. What is not universal is this connection string information. Now, I don't actually have a real connection string because I'm not actually pointed to a database. Note that I just made this visible by clicking the eye icon. By default, it is obfuscated, so when you open it up, it doesn't display automatically, because usually there is a SQL username and a SQL password as part of the connection string. Here's the cool thing. This connection is what actually points to the database. So on my staging and dev servers, on my dev and staging servers, I would have a different connection string than the data source that exists with the same name, SQL data source, on my production server. On my production server, this connection string would actually point to my production data. On my stage and dev servers, this connection string would obviously point to some test data somewhere. Therefore, I can have the same data source name on all three servers, and based on where my form is located, dev, stage, or production, it is going to be looking at a different database in whatever is in whatever environment that it's in. All I have to do is point to the SQL data source that is named, imaginatively, SQL data source, and I can take forms and process timelines or the entire application, and I can export it from dev to staging to production, and it's just going to work. Because during the import process, I don't care what the connection string is for this data source. All I care about is the name and its folder location, which should be this data sources folder at the root of your installation. Once you have configured the three data sources on the three different servers with the appropriate connection string, you never have to worry about it again. You're always going to get the right data for the server on which you are operating, and all of your imports are just going to work seamlessly from server to server to server. That makes your life as a process director administrator much easier and enables you to, it's one less thing to worry about. You can have a more trouble-free experience as you move applications between servers for development, staging, or actual running in production. So those are the two things that I need. I've got to have data of some kind. In our case, it's going to be this Excel data that we've imported into SQL Server. And I've got to need the data source object that makes that connection between my source data and the business values that I'm going to create. So having gone through all of that, let's look at the business values that I've created. The first one is my fill categories dropdown. We were here just a minute ago, and I obviously have to have my data source and it has to be set up right. That long side track is over. I also have to have a SQL statement that grabs the data for me. Prior to version 6.1. I think 5 something, maybe it was a 3 something, I don't remember, but it's a very recent version of Process Director. We have now the Monaco editor. Prior to this, it looked a lot different, and all you had was a text box, and you had to kind of manually write your SQL statements. You don't have to do that anymore. In fact, let's go ahead and recreate this. We'll just create a new one, and we'll call it business value if we can figure out where B is in the alphabet. And we'll just call this webinar for right now. And we're going to do the same configuration that we had for the other business values. So we're obviously going to use our webinar data source object. And whenever you're picking a data source object, it's always worthwhile to just hit test connection and just be sure that you get this connection to DB succeeded. So that lets me know what items that I'm going to have access to by virtue of having access to this particular data source. Now, this data source only connects to 2 tables. So if we look over here on the right side of the page, I just have 2 tables that appear here in the section that is titled Database Schema. And I individually expanded them, but you can expand or collapse them all at the same time. Sometimes you might want a data source that does not connect to all of the data tables in your internal user database. There may be security reasons for this. You don't want all of your implementers to see all of the possible data that exists there. The way around that is in your data source object by simply restricting it. So if we look at our data source object, and I better save this before I go kiting off to a new object. If we look at our data source, there is this select tables button, and notice they are all unchecked. And if I keep scrolling down, eventually I will come across 2 tables that have checkboxes checked next to them. So the select tables feature enables you to take a data source and restrict the data that it sees. So in this case, this data source is restricted to only these 2 tables, and these are the 2 tables that exist in my SQL data source, or in my Excel spreadsheet rather. And so I'm restricting my data source to just those 2 tables that exist in the spreadsheet. Normally, you do have a large data source like this that nothing is selected in. We haven't made any specific selections. So if I go back to this sample webinar business value and I change this data source to my internal user DB global data source, and notice our Spinny is there. There is no table that is specifically selected as part of this data source. So this now gives me every single table that exists in my internal user database. As you can see, I have a lot of them. So if I expand them all, I probably shouldn't because it will take a while to go return all of that. But you can see every table and field that I have. So if you want to restrict your implementers to only seeing specific data, even for your internal user database, rather than having just one global data source like I do, and since I created all of this data, there's no reason to restrict it. And the only reason that I restrict it here in my webinar data source is simply to make my life easier when I configure it so that I only see the two tables that are part of the webinar. So that just makes my life a little easier. But you might want to have multiple internal user data sources so that different implementers have access to slightly different data. I mean, they may have access, in some cases, all of them may have access to some of the tables, but some of those tables will only be accessed by one or two of those data sources because you're trying to restrict what your implementers see. Now, if you're working in an organization where there's only, one or two implementers, generally the implementers can see anything. But we do have some customers who bifurcate their users into different groups and give them access to different portions of the content list. And they only want the people in those groups to see the data that is relevant to them. So let's say you have 4 different groups of implementers. Conceivably, then you would need 4 different connectors to your internal user database. So you'd need 4 different data source objects. And then you would use the select tables feature to specify which tables go for each of the data sources. And that will enable you to apply some extra security at the implementer level. None of this is really a problem for end users on a production server. Your end users shouldn't have access to the content list and shouldn't be looking at it anyway, so they should not have any access to any of this data. This all resides in the background. But if security among your implementation team and segregating off certain types of data from certain implementation team members, then you're probably going to need multiple data sources. So in our case, we're just going to go back here. We have our webinar data source, and we only see our 2 tables here. And I don't even want to be there. I actually want to be in my webinar because we need to actually build this thing. So one of the nice things about the new Monaco editor is that it helps you along if you don't know SQL all that well. If I type in SEL, it automatically gives me the select keyword. Great. Select. What do I want to select? Well, let's say I want to select an item, and I'm going to want to link it to the category ID. So I'm going to need a filter, a where clause. All right, fine. Well, I want to take the item number. So I'm just, oops, I didn't mean to double click that. I just need to take the item number and the description, and I'm just clicking on it, and it is filling out my editor. So item number, description, and what table do I need it from? I need it from, well, it's right there. There's my from statement. So I have IntelliSense to help me. And what table do I want it from? Well, I have sample items and sample items category. So I'm going to start typing the name, and there we go. Sample _ sample items is my table. So I'll just hit my enter key, where, and well, there's my where clause. So I might as well just accept that. Where, and what do I want to check? I want to check that the cat ID equals, and it needs to be some parameter. I would need to add a parameter down here, obviously. So we'll call this parameter cat for category, where cat ID equals, and then I would just put in and all I did is type in 1 curly bracket. It supplied my second curly bracket for me automatically, which is really cool. I see someone has a question. I'll get to you in just a second. Let me not lose my train of thought. And then we'll throw in our parm. I missed something, and it's going to give me an error if I try to save this. And let's look at that error because it's important. Parm, and the parm is called cat. And there we go. I've got a nice SQL statement Not a correct SQL statement, but it's nice so far. And I'm just going to hit update, and it is going to give me a warning. So here's what I forgot. Because I'm using a parameter in my SQL, Process Director is going to get real iffy about allowing me to do that without making this parameter SQL safe. So I did not put in my encoding character in my parameter, and I really need to do that. Now, on my system, it will allow me to do that. It will just give me a warning. On your system, it could very well simply not save the business value at all. Your administrator, which is probably you have the option of forcing your users to use the proper encoding characters for parameters, which is the $ in the case of SQL. My system is set up not to force it, but to at least warn me, and that is as unrestrictive as it gets. So you will, even if you try to enable it, you'll still get that warning that you are messing up. You need to have a SQL safe parameter, and you need to use the encoding character to make it so. So I will add the $ there, and now I will hit update, and my warning will go away. SQL validation issues. So incorrect syntax next to parm. I'm not sure what that is all about, but it saved it for me anyway, so I'm happy. Save allowed due to backwards compatibility setting. Okay, so there's a backwards compatibility setting somewhere there. I'm not sure what it is, and I'm not sure exactly what I've done wrong, especially with such a simple SQL statement, but it doesn't matter because I had an allowed save. I'm going to save exactly what I asked for. I am going to get rid of that extra space. I don't necessarily have to. And quite frankly, I don't need that space right there, but I just have 30 years of writing SQL statements behind me that I have a format that I use, and I'm not going to stop using it. A couple of other features that you have here. You have a format feature, which will actually format your SQL into the appropriate Monaco editor style. And then you have the two buttons that everybody has. They're in a little different area. They're at the top here in the Monaco editor. They are below the text box in older versions of Process Director that doesn't use the Monaco editor. But these two buttons are still there where we can add columns as properties. So if I click that, it will just take all of the columns. Wait a second, incorrect syntax near. Oh, I know what my incorrect syntax is, because it is expecting, I think, single quotes, because I think it's running it as text. So let's try it that way. There we go. I neglected to put my single quotes in. Now they're there. And now clicking add columns as properties gives me my columns. And of course, you have clear all properties. I can simply click that to remove all of the properties. But obviously, I want to keep that. The test query still works the way that you would expect. You hit test query, and it will not return any records because I don't have a category set. So let me put in category 2 as my category. Let me retest that. And there we go. Now I get all of my items back the way that I want them back. So there was a question which I said I would answer, but have neglected to do so. You're talking about a list of tables we can see, but we couldn't see it. I'm not sure what you're saying. Um, um, what is it that you couldn't see? Could you not see the tables listed over here on the right under database schema? Or are you not seeing the list of tables that I was referring to here when I opened the select tables and we were looking at all of these tables? I don't I don't know what you mean you couldn't see the tables. Because I'm just monitoring my screen here and it says, okay, okay, that's okay. It was off screen, maybe. Um, I mean, I don't know. It's on screen for me because I can see the big green border about what you should be seeing on your screen. So I'm not sure what might have been off screen for you because I'm showing everything from the blue bar all the way down to the bottom of my screen. So I'm showing everything out to the OK menu on the far right side and the content list on the left. So I can only tell you what's going out from it's okay. All right. Well, sorry about that. I'm not sure what you're referring to because from my perspective, I'm showing everything that I'm talking about is showing inside the area that's being transmitted to Zoom. So I apologize if you're not seeing what you expect. In any event, that is the basic function of the SQL business value. We added the properties, although we didn't save it. So we'll hit test query again. Oh, of course, we didn't save any of the items here. So we're parm cat. And of course, I have to put in a category so that it finds something. And then we'll test the query. Great. It brings in all of our category 1 items. There's only 3 of them. And then we just add columns as properties as normal. Now both of the columns that exist in the database are here and my parameter exists. We've got our appropriate SQL encoding character on our parameter. So we now have a good business value that we can use. And that is, by the way, this business value here, this fill drop downs categories. It's essentially exactly the same one, except in this case, we're literally just pulling the categories, not the items. So the category items is the one that we basically just recreated. So here's just shows me my categories. If I test the query, it returns my 3 categories that exist. The one that we just replicated was this one, where I have my parameter already exists. It's called cat ID. My SQL statement works. I guess the only thing that I could do here, oh, I have no encoding character in there. That's going to make everybody unhappy. So let's update that. And while we're updating this, let's format it so it looks all pretty and stuff. So this is how we're pulling our items. We're just pulling everything from the sample items table where the category ID equals my parameter. And we're also setting the order. We're setting it by the description, the text name, in descending order. So the field that I'm calling name in my business value is description in the source data. So if we look at our sample items table over here on the left, that's actually the name. The description is actually what I'm calling the name as part of my property. This is something you're probably going to want to remember. And you're going to want to keep it in mind because let's look at our form and let's take a look at these drop downs. I am spending more time on SQL than maybe we actually have. I may have to cut some of the other portions a little bit shorter because it's already 10:39. So we can add an item here. Let's add actually 2 items so we can see 3 different things. So if I pick electronics, I get these 3 items. We'll pick computer monitor. If I pick office, I get these 5 items here. We'll pick Diet Coke. And if I pick outdoor equipment, I get these 3 items here. We'll pick edge trimmer. Whatever appears in this dropdown is based on the value of this drop down here. So the value that I select here determines what options are going to be available to me in the item drop down. This is something you're going to want to bookmark and you're going to want to remember. So I had a tech support ticket from somebody who was building a form, and they said, here's what I've got. I have 2 drop downs, and each of those drop downs looks at a different drop down object. And based on some items I put in, what they originally said was, I have a drop down control and I have 2 drop down objects. And based on some value that exists in the form, I want to change the drop down object that is used to fill my drop down control. Can't do that. Drop down controls assume that there is going to be one canonical data source that is going to provide all of the options that appear in the dropdown and which you can select. I can't on the fly say, okay, I'm using dropdown object 1. So the dropdown object, let me just sort of create one real fast so that we can see. So here's the dropdown object. We'll just again call this webinar. And drop-down objects are really useful because what they allow you to do is just to say, you know what, I just want to create the source for drop-down options. And so I'm just going to have a null entry called select 1. I am having a horrible problem with my keyboard. It is not reliably letting the space bar work, which means I may need a new keyboard. But I have some drop down entries here. So here's my text, drop down 1, 2, 3, 4. I can have a separate value if I want, all of which is really cool. So now the user will see drop down 1 and the value will be 1. Okay, well, this is great. And when I am configuring a drop down object on a form, if I go to the form controls tab for a drop down object, so let me just go ahead and save this. So I now have a drop down with 4 options, right? And this drop down is called webinar. So on my form, if I go into the form controls tab or in the design console of the online form designer, and I go to one of these drop downs, on the field properties, I have this link to drop-down object property, and I can set that so that it will use that drop-down object as the source for all of my options. I can only have one drop-down object. There is no function in Process Director that allows me to say, I wanted to go to drop-down A, and if the user is in the finance department, I want to use one drop-down object as the source for the options. And if they're in the HR department, I want to use a different drop-down as the source. Can't do that. What the SQL business value enables you to do is to use the same drop-down object for, in this case, 3 different data sources. Now, it's not really 3 different data sources. This is the data source for that drop-down object. It is going to grab everything from sample items where category ID equals the parameter. Well, I have 3 different parameters I can pass, 1, 2, or 3. And because I can do that, that means that as a practical matter on my form, this is the same drop-down, but it has 3 different sets of options because I have different choices that I made here. And so I'm going to have different options available to me. So the standard way of making a dynamic drop-down is to do what I've just done. I have a list of items. Those items have a category ID in this case. So I can choose that category ID to change what items appear in the dropdown, all I have to do is configure my fill dropdowns tab on the form. So let's move this at least right there so that I can click on it to make it come up when we want to look at it again. So I go into my form itself and I go into the fill dropdowns tab. I am always going to fill this dropdown with the, well, I'm going to fill the item category dropdown. It's always going to be filled with the sample fill to dropdowns categories. Likewise, the item dropdown is always going to be filled with the sample to dropdowns category items. And of course, these are all business values. And because they're business values, and this particular business value happens to be parameterized, I can simply, in this case, pass it the value of my category form field, and it will accept that as the parameter because while the category shows office, outdoor, and whatever the other electronics, that's what I see. But the actual values are 1, 2, or 3 for that dropdown. So it is going to pass the category ID 1, 2, or 3 to the business value, and it's just going to return the items that I want. This is probably the simplest method of having a dynamic data source for a dropdown, but that is probably one of the most important ways of using a SQL business value to enable you to have a single dropdown which has multiple values that you can have available to you whenever you fill out that dropdown. So keep that in mind. That's going to be something really useful for you in terms of how you configure dropdowns in Process Director. This is one of the key things about using these business values to fill dropdowns. Now, the other thing that we are doing on this form, we should probably go back and look at that form, is this item number and this price. That is all getting filled in automatically. Now, the way that we are doing that is via this item info business value right here. So on our form, we are calling that business value. So let's go back and look at our form definition. We'll go to the set form data tab. And we can see here that we have the item number and the item price. The event is whenever we change the item name. So we have this item name event. The item name drop down is an event field. So when I change the value of that event field, it's going to look at that drop down and it is going to pass the value of the item name drop down. So remember, when we created that item drop down, we had our two properties, which is our name and our ID. And in the dropdown itself, the ID is the value and the name is the display text. So the value of this particular dropdown is always going to be whatever the item number happens to be. I am presuming that that item number is unique, so it can serve as an item ID. If it is not unique, we have a problem. And we do need a unique value to make all of this work. But what I want to do is just grab from sample items where the item number matches the item number. So if we go to our sample items table, there we go, there's our item number. And we'll just order it by description. Now, this should return a single value, because we're only going to fill one set of fields. So it does need to be a single value. Now, the way that I've configured it, it will be a single value. So you have to be sure that that ID is unique for each record. But given an item number, I better grab an item number that exists. So CM417, we'll copy that and we'll set that as our test value for our parameter. And that should return when we hit test query, our monitor, which in fact it does, and gives us our price. So I need these two fields, the description and the price, and I'm going to use the set form data action to use this business value to fill those two fields whenever I change the value of this item. So if I were to pick a backhoe instead of an edge trimmer, the item becomes substantially more expensive than an edge trimmer does because it just grabs all of this data and it pulls it back and it makes the appropriate changes to these two fields as I change the item. So SQL Business Value is probably your best friend when it comes to doing business values. But we're going to have to leave SQL Business Values there, and we're going to have to move over to KView business values so that we can use knowledge views as business values as well. So I have this existing request form and process timeline. We don't really need to look at them because I already have existing instances of the request. As you can see, I have 9 of them. And I actually have a reporting form that pulls back these items. And you are about to see something that will frighten and confuse you, but which I will explain in a moment. But we're going to run our form, and our form is going to pop open. Okay, I'm pretty happy with what I see here on this column. Not quite as happy with what I have going on here. I am seeing a GUID. Why am I seeing a GUID? This is one of the things that you have to be aware of when you use a knowledge view as a data source. So I have a knowledge view. It is very simply constructed. I'm not sure why that is chosen because you usually don't need to choose both. So let me update that. And so it just looks at my existing request form. We just saw there were 9 form instances of it that exist. Then we'll go to our configure tab. There's really nothing here that we care about. We haven't changed any of the default settings. Our options tab, the only thing we're returning is a form instance, so we're good there. Which again takes me back to the properties tab. I'm returning form instances. I only need to associate a form instance with this knowledge view. I do not need to associate a timeline with it as well. If I return the form instance, I have access to all of the timeline data. There are cases where you might want to have, multiple things chosen here, but in general, you only need to choose either a form or a timeline, or if you are for some reason still using workflows, a workflow. So I only need to associate one of these things. In most cases, you're returning form instances, so you just need a form associated with knowledge view. It's the only thing you need to worry about. Our columns, I haven't even done anything on the columns. I haven't changed any of the default columns. It's all the same. There is nothing to filter this thing. If I update and run it, all it's going to do is return my 9 items. But notice when it returns the 9 items, Barb Stanley, then a lot of me, and then Diana Stewart. Okay, that's showing me names. That's what I expect. But my form showed me not names, but GUIDs. Let's take a look at my business value. So in my all requests business value, and let's get rid of that because we're not using that. I need to choose my knowledge view. In this case, all requests, this knowledge view right here that we just looked at. Now I can put a filter in not going to, but I certainly could. And I could filter that knowledge view by placing a filter here. But we'll um, we'll talk about that another time. The one thing that is important whenever you're using a knowledge view as a data source is the execute knowledge view under this user context. Now, I've chosen myself as the user context to use when running this knowledge view. In other words, anytime someone calls this knowledge view data source, so anytime anyone opens this columns form, they will run the business value. In order to get data, the business value has to have the appropriate permissions to run the knowledge view that provides the source data. Knowledge views can run based on who is running them, the permissions of the person that is running them. Well, a business value isn't a person. It doesn't have any permissions. So we have to have a user who has permission to at least run that knowledge view and see the results. And that is what the evaluate knowledge view under this user context does for us. It enables us to choose a user who can run that knowledge view. In my case, since this is my system and I run it, I'm the only user. So I'm the only person who matters on this system. So therefore, I use myself as the user context. So it always runs it as me. On a production system, you probably wouldn't do that. On a production system, you would probably have a user, call it the knowledge view context user. It'd probably be a built-in user. And you would give it the appropriate access to knowledge views that you wanted to use for business values so that you could just use that as the knowledge view context for running the business value so that when the business value runs, it'll call the knowledge view as if it were, in this case, me, or in your case, whatever user you have created to be the context user for knowledge views called by business values. And therefore, it would just run under that user context. So you are, whenever you create the knowledge view, you're not only going to have to pick a user, but you're going to have to put in the password for that user the first time before you save it. Once you save it once, that user context is saved permanently unless you change it. So I don't have to go in and put my own password here, for example, every time I want to save this knowledge or this business value. But the first time that I do it, I will need to have both my name and my username before it will save the business view. The business value. It will not actually save the business value unless you have the username and password. So you can't even save the business value unless you can provide the context up front. So that is the one roadblock to using this. The other is the output that you're going to get whenever you do this. Knowledge views work differently than SQL business values because knowledge views hide some complexity from you. So if we were to go back and run this knowledge view, by the way, everything else is the same. I still have to create my properties. I still have to pick my columns. The one thing that I have to do is it's not a database column because this is not a SQL database. It is a knowledge view column. And when you pick knowledge view column, it will actually give you the names of the columns and optionally, if the column contains numbers and you want to do some aggregation on those numbers, you can do it here with this aggregation one. These are both basically text columns, so we don't really have any math that we can do. So we only want to return the actual column data. And that's where our problem begins. Because knowledge views hide some complexity for you, when you run this knowledge view, so we'll go back to our all requests knowledge view and we'll run it. This shows me the names. It's either me, Barb, or Diana. That's cool. That's not the data that's in that column, but it's cool that it shows me the names. But it's showing me the names because we are hiding the actual value from you, and we're showing you a human-friendly value in the knowledge view. That is built into the knowledge view. That's pretty cool. But that is not the data the knowledge view is actually returning. That is Process Director trying to make you think that things are simpler than they are. The truth of what is actually stored in this column is revealed when we run the columns form. Because what gets displayed to you in that column is not, in fact, Barb, Dale, Diana. It is the GUIDs for Diana, Barb, and I. These are our actual user UIDs, our GUIDs in the system. These are our unique identifiers that tell the difference between, Barb and I. So you always have to be careful whenever you're using a knowledge view as a business value, because the business value is not going to try to make your life easier by hiding this complexity. It's going to show you the actual data that the knowledge view is returning. So that means we have to do something a little bit different in our knowledge view. So normally our knowledge view, this all requests knowledge view, we'd be perfectly happy with this, seeing it as a knowledge view because it gives us all the human data that we're happy with. So if we go into columns, and I have the name set here for form submit user, well, that's cool and all. However, form submit user doesn't return my name. It returns my GUID. So there are a lot of fields like this, especially fields that Process Director helps you with by sort of hiding this complexity, that you have to manually configure in your knowledge view if you don't want to return a GUID. Well, what have I done? I clearly have closed the form again. I have to learn to keep these forms open. So let me go back. Let me run the form again. Sorry. There, we'll keep it open right there because we're seeing our GUIDs right now. And of course, I don't want to see my GUID. So what do I need to do inside here? Well, one of the cool things about knowledge views is that I can kind of massage these columns. All of this column data that we're showing here, there's a reason this is called the Choose System Variable dialog box, because that's all that we're choosing. Form submit user is a system variable. Sure, we have the cool little menu thing where you can come here and pick form submit user, but it's actually the system variable. What that means is, I can use system variables as actual column names. Now, we're going to make it easy for you to do that with the menu, but there's no rule that says you have to do that. I can go to value and string, and then it gives me this little text box here, and I can just type in form submit user format equals name, and we'll hit OK there. And then we'll update and we'll run. And lo and behold, it looks exactly the same. But now on our form, if we refresh it, it should actually be returning my name. Let me be sure I put the right stuff in there, because I am just as fallible as anybody else. So let me look for the system variables. Let me look for user system variables. Name returns the user's name. So that system variable should be returning the user's name, unless, of course, did I leave process director? I did. Oh no. Let's go back to, well, let's get my content list back up again. Let's go back to KView business values. Let's look at all requests. Form submit user format equals name. What I expected this to return was my name. So there may be another parameter I need to use. So let me just be sure. So we'll go back to system variables again. Forms, oh, nope, not form system variables, user system variables, because we're returning a user. So format option should be the name. Now, I did not use a capital, so it's returning that. Let me add a column. I'm going to, sorry, let me call this, because this is the key column, column 1. So let me add a new column, and we'll call it actual name. And value string, and form submit user, comma, format equals name. Okay, and update and run. And it is returning the name. Now let's go into our business value, our all requests business value. And this time for our name, we will pick actual name. We'll update that. Now that should return the actual name. Let us refresh. There we go. There is my name. So 2 things to look out for whenever you're doing this. So I got Barb, I've got all me, and then I got Diana. This is exactly what I wanted to see. So in the knowledge view, one thing you got to be careful of is this first column. That first column is always going to be the linking column, and that's always going to return, basically it's going to return a GUID. So even if I put form submit user, that column is going to want to return a GUID. So I have to go to the second or other column, like I did here with actual name, and then I can just set form submit user format equals name, and it will return the name for me. So that is one of the stumbling blocks you have to work through. Don't try to do it in column 1, because that is a GUID column, because that is a key column that provides the link that you would click from the knowledge view to go wherever it was that you needed to go. So you're going to want to go to one of the other columns, and you don't want to return, like in this case for a user, you don't want to just return a user system variable, because that user system variable in the context of a business value is always going to return the GUID, because that's what's actually being returned is the GUID. Similarly, in a knowledge view, if I am using a drop-down control, a knowledge view will by default show you the text, the display text that has been selected in that drop-down control, the business value will show you the actual value. So like for our category drop-down that we saw earlier, it's going to show me 1, 2, or 3 as the value. It is not going to show me the display string. So if you're going to use a knowledge view as a business value data source, that's fine with some caveats. Number one, the one we've been talking about, remember any system variable that returns a GUID or an actual value will return that GUID or the actual value in the business value, even though the knowledge view itself will display as you expect. Knowledge views want to help you. Business values want to give you exactly what you've asked them for. So keep that in mind. The second caveat, and it's one that is always relevant to business values, is, or not business values, but knowledge views, is knowledge views can be expensive. Knowledge views can take a long time to respond. And when you're calling the business value, you're actually making it worse, because now you're not just calling the knowledge view to return data, you're calling a business value object, which then in turn has to call the knowledge view to return its data. However long that knowledge view takes to run, that's going to be added to the time that it takes your business value to run. And so you got to keep in mind that if you have a knowledge view and you want to return 500 or 600 rows out of a knowledge view, that is an extraordinarily bad idea. But if you do it, it's going to take whatever time it takes to pull, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 rows out of your database and return it to your business value, because that knowledge view has to run and it's going to take the time it takes to return that data to you. So obviously, our primary way of getting data, we should probably think of the SQL business value for grabbing this data. Now, if you're trying to grab certain types of data coming from the system that you would pull from a knowledge view, there are ways to do that in the actual database itself. So if we go to the database reference guide, which probably more people should look at, not only do we see the table definitions for all of the tables and what data is stored. So technically you could create your own select queries to pull that data. Please only use select queries. Exercise extreme caution when accessing the process director tables directly. With that in mind, you can do it. However, if you're looking for process data, we have already built in a number of internal views that return process, process task user data. So like process task user tells you what user's doing something, what process they're working on, what task has been assigned to them. The data exists in these views. Your task lists all have their own views. Now, these are built into Process Director. You could just type in select star from BP user, and it will just return all the user data that is set up in the system. So you can actually pull this with a SQL data source. So there's a lot of good stuff here that you can grab just using a SQL data source without having to try to pull this stuff back from a knowledge view, which quite frankly is going to be super tedious and may take a long time to pull this back, because we're trying to pull data from a knowledge view across 10 or 12 different tables with a whole bunch of joins on it. It's going to be a lot faster if you use these built-in views that exist in Process Director. If you are looking for process or user-based information, we've got you covered. They exist, and you can pull that with a SQL business value. But of course, obviously, for some process data, you would have to use the knowledge view. Now, if you're only returning form instances, you do have another option. Let's go and look at this, because we can cover this real quickly. because it kind of works alongside and it's the same concept as a knowledge view business value. Uh, what it is, if we open this business value, is I have form instances. Now, the trouble with a knowledge view is that it's going to want to chop through all of the existing form instances on your system just to return the ones that you want. So it's already got in some built-in delay on the knowledge view side. Plus, there are all of the other things that make a knowledge view work, which is you've got the knowledge view is hooked up to a lot of different tables. And the SQL gets changed for just the data that you want to return, but there are still a lot of tables that are connected under the hood with a lot of joins. And without getting into a bunch of technical detail, I will just tell you that that slows down how SQL can return data to you. That's just an inherent feature of knowledge views because it's sort of this generic thing that says you might want to see anything anywhere in process director. And to make that work, it is complex and it is also very expensive in terms of system resources. It's real simple on the front end, the part that you see. The back end is horrifically complicated and soaks up a lot of system resources. However, most of the time, whenever you're pulling back a knowledge view, most of the time you're just pulling back form instances. So rather than pull from a knowledge view, there is the form instances data source. What the form instances data source enables you to do is to just pick a form definition. So in this case, I have picked the source form. And I just want to see the instances of the source form. That's as complicated as it gets. Well, actually, I might have a condition that I apply. So, include form instance when the form submit date is, less than 30 days ago. And then it will filter. So I can filter, but basically, and if I do put a filter on, you do want to check the test form conditions just to be sure that it's returning the number of forms that you expect to see. For example, I would expect to see nothing if I said the form submit date. So form submit date was, equals today. I haven't submitted anything today, so I think this should work. So if the form submit date equals today. So right now I have 8 form instances total. And if I click this, include form instance when form submit equals, it still says 8 instances matched my condition. Not sure that's correct. Oh, well, it reset the form definition too. So training webinar, business values, form instance business values, source form is the source form I want. Let me update here. Let me test the form conditions. Okay, there we go. That's what I'm expecting. 0 form instances match the specified condition because I didn't submit a form today. So we're just going to go ahead and get rid of this condition because I do want to return all 8 form instances. We'll hit OK there. Okay. Okay. Why doesn't it do that for me? All right. Well, I don't know what the problem was there, but we're good now. We will hit update. We will test our form conditions again. I don't have any, so I should be back to 8 form instances. Great. Now, for a form, I actually get the form field is what I'm looking for to return as a property. So I'm just going to use the form field. And then, of course, I can just choose the form fields that exist on the form. There's only 2 of them, first name and and last name. So this gives me an easy, quick way just to grab all the form instances from a single form. I don't have to create a knowledge view as an underlying data source for it. I just get to skip all of that. All I really have to do is pick a form definition, set my property type to form field, pick the form field that I want to apply to each property, and I am done, so that whenever I run my form, which is my result form right here, I can just hit run. Who submitted the source form? Well, let's get their names. So I'll click the Get Names button, and these are the famous Romans who have submitted forms on my system, or at least submitted copies of the source form. So this gives you a shortcut around a knowledge view business value if all you need is form data. Now, obviously, if you need any data that is connected to the related timeline, then you're going to have to go back to a knowledge view. But if all you care about is form data, this is a quick and easy shortcut just to pull form data. So think of the form instance and the knowledge view business value types as basically working hand in hand with each other. And that brings us to the REST business value. If you are a cloud customer, and we do have a couple of cloud customers that do this. If you're a cloud customer, your IT department might be real iffy about enabling you to touch the SQL database from outside your firewall, outside the network boundary. So you can't actually touch SQL data, but at the same time, there may be APIs for REST web services that they give you access to, or in my case, in this example, there is a number of public REST data sources that you can access to return data for your forms. So if you can't access SQL Server directly inside your network, it may very well be that there is a REST service that they are willing to expose. They'll probably require some form of authentication with that REST service before they release any data to you. But you might be able to get that data directly through REST web services. If so, you don't have to go through all the rigmarole that we talked about earlier of grabbing some sort of SQL data, exporting it to Excel, and then transporting that Excel file up to Process Director to update your internal user database. Because REST web services give you direct access to the data from the web service. So you can't touch the SQL Server itself, but they might expose a secured REST web service outside the network boundary so that no matter where you are, you can access that REST web service and thus access the data, drag it across to the local computer of the user, and they would be able to use that data, and it would come straight out of SQL Server. That is a very convenient way of grabbing data. Well, it's convenient technically. It's less convenient when it comes to putting all of this stuff together. So let's look at our REST data form. Now, I have an entire webinar on JSON or JSON path and JSON and XML and XPath. We are not going to get into that level of detail here today. We're just going to kind of skim the surface because, well, it's 11:24. There's just a limit to the amount of detail we can get into. If you have a web, I would say up to probably 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, you had a very good chance, if you were interacting with a web service, of getting that web service data back in XML format. So if you want to look over here, and maybe I should Control plus, 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 so that we can see this. So let's look right down here. So this is sample XML. XML is a very structured language, right? So I have files, and inside my files, I have 5 items. Here's my first item. And we know it's my first item because it has a tag that says item. And then it has the item name, image1.jpg. And then it has another tag that says end item. And it goes on and on and on. If we go up one level to files, I've got a tag that says files. Okay, files must start here. I've got a tag down here at the bottom that says, oh, end files. There must be no more files. Super structured, relatively easy to understand as a human, and so easier to work with. It's got a drawback because I have to have these open and close tags for everything. An XML file can puff up like a tick because I've got to have I'm just not passing data to you. I'm passing all of this extra XML content with all of these opening and closing tags and sub tags. It can get tedious, and it can get long, which means that, trying to pull, some data down might be, like, and again, in absolute terms, it's not that big a deal, but it might be like 124 kilobytes to pull this data down because it is so structured. Being structured like that does make it easy to find data in it. And XPath is a very reliable method of finding that data. We'll take a look at XPath and JSON path examples in a bit. After about, JSON and JSON path kind of exploded onto the scene around 2012, 2013-ish. By 2020, pretty much anything new that was being created, heck, probably by 2017, anything new that was being created was returning JSON rather than XML. XML is nice, it's structured, it's easier to read, but the file size is really big compared to JSON format. JSON format said, you know what we're going to do? We are going to do 2 things. Number one, we're not going to require all of these opening and closing things. What we're going to do is we're going to use sort of the JavaScript conventions, and we're going to build a data structure out of JavaScript. Now, XML is very structured. We know what the data structure is because we have this hierarchical set of tags. In this case, we have 2 levels, files and items. JSON, we decided, we're not going to do that. We're going to pass you the data, and we're going to structure it any way that we want. So here is the basically same data presented to you 4 different ways in JSON. There's a lot of different ways that you can send the data. And like this unstructured array right here, that is a pretty terse way of sending the data. The first thing that's missing, I still have files as sort of a tag. It's actually a name, not a tag, but it's files. Then I've got these square brackets that says I'm just going to send you a list of files. And then I've just got the actual names inside quotation marks, and there's a little comma after each one until you get to the end. When you get to the end, obviously your list is done. There's no comma. This is a substantially smaller set of data than the same data in JSON because of all of the opening and closing tags. And of course, I have to have the XML declaration at the top. I don't need any of that for JSON. That means I can send you back data in JSON, even the same data, in a multiplicity of ways. It's more confusing. It is more difficult to parse because you have to know what, like here, of these 4 structures, which one is my REST service returning to me? Because until I know that, I cannot identify how to get any of this data because each of these four structures are going to require a different method called JSON path of parsing this JSON return and pulling this data back. For XPath, there's only one way that I can get to the data because it is so highly structured. So this sends me big files that are easy for me to read and to parse. This sends me tinier files that are harder to read and that can be sent in a variety of different ways. And in fact, the REST service that sends the data back might have used each of these different methods in different sections, which does turn into a nightmare. You really do need to have some discipline when you're writing a REST web service to return JSON. So here's how it works. Usually, what happens with a REST web service? This has all gotten very big. Let's go back to 100% here. I have all of these different methods of grabbing data. As we saw from the form, which I stupidly closed, I have these four methods of grabbing this JSON data. And I've actually got that data here. I've got a, see, let's close that. Let's go to REST business values. And I actually have the REST data. I've actually got the JSON and the XML sample files here. So I've got the raw data. These are on the form. Those are just pictures I took of the data just to display on the form. In general, however, REST data sources are really easy to grab. So let's go here to this current weather. Let's start with currentweather.xml because this is the easiest one to play around with. So for a REST data source, I generally need at least one thing, which is the URL of the REST service. What URL do I have to call to pull that REST service? Now, in this case, there is openweathermap.org. So I'm pulling weather data. It is a free weather service that you can pull data off of. You have to sign up for like a free API key. But other than that, it's a free service. They do throttle your use of it. But I mean, it's super generous. It's like, 5,000 calls per minute or something like that, which I will, of course, never use. But it's an open web service and all of my data is here. Now, there are a couple of different ways that I can grab data from a REST data source. OpenWeatherMap uses the simplest method possible, which is it's just included as part of the URL, as part of the URL parameters, right? So if I was to copy, let's close that. So let's go with a new text file here. And let's make this a little larger. And let's paste that. So it's openweathermap.org/data/2.5 weather. That's the URL. This is the actual REST web service. This REST web service happens to accept URL parameters. So I've got a zip parameter, and I've also got an app ID parameter. So that's the application that I'm using. Then it has a units parameter. So units are imperial. And then finally, it has a mode parameter. It will return the data in XML format. So it's got URL parameters. Now, there's a second way of doing this, and I don't know which your web services might use. That is kind of similar, but rather than using URL parameters, what it does is it changes the URL. So what it might look like would be weather dot, and by the way, let's get rid of this. Let's just put in a zip code, right? So let's just use a San Diego zip code, 92087. Okay, so that's my zip. So now let me copy and paste that again. The second way is, like I said, to change the URL. So it might look something like this. So still the same thing, really. However, it's just going, saying, okay, well, this is where I'm going. And then the REST web service will start looking at all of the slashes after weather to determine what data to pull back. So that's a second very common way of pulling this data in, just pulling it in by the URL, and either having a custom configured URL or just having the base URL with a bunch of URL parameters. Those are the two most common ways that it works. However, there's also a third way, and that would be using HTTP headers. So the URL would just be that. And I would have to be able to pass zip and units. So my zip, let's say 92087, and units imperial, and mode would be XML, and app ID would be, oh, sorry, app ID tab would be whatever the app ID was, and it wouldn't have spaces in it, whatever it was. All right, so that's a third way of passing data. You will have to know how that data is passed, so you will have to ask your system administrator of those REST web services how to grab that data. One of these three methods is going to be what they use. They may require authentication. So there is a compliance data source, and a compliance data source usually only allows you to put in the name and, well, there are different kinds of compliance data sources. But under your data sources, you may have some compliance data sources. So I have this REST compliance data source. Okay, this REST compliance data source would pass an OAuth token and a token secret to a REST web service. So it uses OAuth to identify that, hey, you are authorized to log in and see this service. Now, as an administrator, I am going to want to put in that auth token and token secret. And I think that would work for Google. If it's Microsoft, it will require a client ID, a client secret, and it's the tenant ID, the client ID, and the client secret that it would require. So it would require three pieces of data for that. And of course, I could just add those if it was a Microsoft one. This is kind of a Google one. Auth token and token secret is what I would have to pass. Now, the cool thing about the compliance data source is that I, as an administrator, can have access to the compliance data source, and I can set the auth token and the token secret. When this data source needs to be used and some implementer is just setting it up, then when they go in to set it up, they would just choose that compliance data source. So they would just go into data sources. And in this case, I have REST compliance. I also have REST service auth. I have several compliance data sources, but we'll just say that's the not REST compliance. Maybe it was REST compliance. I don't remember. It's a compliance data source. So that will now pass my authentication information that's required to the REST service and get me in so that it can pull the data back that I want to pull. And of course, I can test my REST call and it'll find all the right stuff. I don't need this for this, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. And then once I have my data here, so I'm passing a parameter called zip, right? So if I just test my REST call, it did not indicate success. Well, it wouldn't because I don't have a parameter there. So 92087, and we test that REST call again. It indicated 404, not found. So whatever that is that I have messed up, and I don't know what it is, I want to get out of here and hope I didn't save it, because on my REST sample, okay, oh, nope, it is not returning anything. I've done something awful. I don't know what I have done for my REST web service. Does JSON still work? Haven't opened that up, so I can't have destroyed it. JSON is not working. What is not working? I did this morning and it was all working. So I don't know why it is not pulling it's not pulling my data back. That's not great. So we can't actually see it running. Unless I've just lost, of course, if I had lost internet access, I wouldn't be talking to you, would I? So let's try it one more time. I know it's at least calling it. REST business values. Let's run the REST sample. Run. Okay, happily, all of my other stuff is working. So we're cool with all this. Of course, that is my JSON. So I'm happy with that. So okay, there we go. 92087 might not be a zip code. 92087. Apparently, it is not a zip code. There we go. Well, I have data there. So if we go back and test our uh, business value with a valid zip code, and test REST call, I'm going to see data, but it's going to be real confusing, right? It is going to show me that it's returning 873 characters, and it's giving me basically the REST web call. I'm kind of curious. If we go to current weather JSON and I go 92111 and I test that REST call, that successfully returned 499 characters. So I'm just, but again, I can see the REST data that gets returned. So the difference between these two items here is not how I get to my data. That's going to be the same for both. But now we're back to how it's going to give the data back to me, which, depending on which one of these we look at, is going to be either XML or JSON. Like I said, I have an entire webinar on nothing but JSON, path, and XPath. So we are not going to get into the details of how we pull this data back. But if the data comes back in XML, I have to use something called XPath to get to my data when that data returns. What I'm basically doing is I am following the path through the XML, right? So if we go back over here and we look at my simple structured array, the XPath to any of these items would be /files slash item, and then I would need to provide the index for it. 1, 2, 3, well, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, since there are 7 items there. And this is XPath. It is always the node slash child node slash, and then we get into the name and value. It is 11:44, so we are not going to get into the business of explaining these individual items here. Again, I have a whole 2-hour webinar on XPath and JSON Path where I go into detail into how this stuff is constructed and how you parse it. But XPath and JSON Path are different, and they use different naming conventions. So for XPath, it's current slash clouds to get to, the cloudiness. And with JSON, well, the conditions are called $.weather.main. That JSON depends on what is being returned. I have this sample doc here that we can take a look at. And let me just download a copy of it real fast and open it. So here is my XML. So remember, whenever we were looking at our current weather, XML. Okay, so our conditions is at current slash clouds at name. All right, well, let's see what we can find here. There's current, cool, slash clouds. Oh, there we go, clouds. Okay, clouds has some weird stuff. It's got value equals 1, name equals clear sky. So it has some attributes. So to get, in this case, clear sky from that XML, my XPath would be current slash clouds, and it has that name attribute. So I would just use at name. And it's pretty simple and easy to understand. Then we go into JSON, and this is what the JSON data looks like. Both of this is from OpenWeatherMap. So this is the structure that the data comes in from openweathermap.org. So the JSON looks a little different. Let's make this a little bigger so it's a little easier to read. I don't think we can get it all on the screen at the same time unless, can I do that? Yeah, I can do that. Now we can get all of our JSON on the screen at the same time. So this looks a little bit different. And if we go back over here to our current weather JSON and we look at JSON path, let's take a look at what we're doing. $.weather.main. All right, what does that mean? Well, first of all, dollar dot dollar is going to start everything. Dollar means all of this, the entire response. That's the global context of the response. Instead of using slashes, it uses the period character, the dot, to go to the next node down in the JSON, right? So it is $.weather.main. All right, so $, well, that's everything. .weather. All right, well, see that first curly bracket there? That is going to be our first dot. That is going to be our parent node. So $dot gets me to there. And then it goes to the next node, which is weather. Okay, cool. That's there. And then it's .main. Square brackets and curly brackets you can always think of as the dots. So in XML, you would have slashes between all of these different XML tags. Here I have dots. So $.weather ... There's my first dot. It's curly is a square bracket. And there's my second dot, a curly bracket, dot, dot. And I've got 4 attributes I can access here: ID, main, description, icon. So I can pick main. So $ dot weather dot dot main pulls that out of the JSON. So all of these different JSONs have different ways of getting to it. Now, I have some examples of that off of the form. So go back to our form. I have these 4 examples: single element, simple structured array, etc. I've got the XML or the JSON here in these files, and I've also got the different business values that would actually pull that data. So with this particular method, it is $dot dot files. If I go to my simple structured array, it is files slash ampersand, not ampersand, but what is, yeah, I forget what it is. If that is that the ampersand or whatever the star character is, files slash star. That's going to return, that's the JSON path to return that data. Structured sub element away, $dot files dot dot F. $dot files dot F. And each one of those F's is got an index, so 0 to whatever. So F1 F. So it's the same data, but it's presented here in different ways. And so I've got different JSON paths to get to it. Once again, I cover this all in much more detail in the JSON path and XPath webinar. So to get really into the weeds for that, you would need to pull that. But once I have that data and I know how to get to it, actually creating my form becomes quite simple. And we're really only concerned about what's going on here at the very top level, where we have both the JSON and the XML weather. So I've got this form field here. This form field is, if I can select the form field and we go to its field properties, this is actually an event field. And so when my event fires, I am going to call a business value on the Set Form Data tab to fill all of these form fields. So if I go back into my Set Form Data tab, I can see that I have both my JSON and my XML form fields, or my XML business values, and it just fills these form fields with the appropriate data. Given a zip code, it will return the correct data back and fill my form fields from the Open Weather Map public API. There's also one more thing here that we have added. It's not technically part of business values. We'll look at it real quick. We have a custom task called convert or JSON to CSV from a REST call. So it can actually take our JSON and just convert it to a CSV file and store that for us in the content list. Once we have it in a CSV file, well, we could actually just import that directly into Excel or save it as Excel and import it into our internal user database or what have you. But we can actually do that direct export. So that's built into the form as well too. So as we saw earlier, all I have to do is put in a valid zip code, and it is going to return the data for me from each of those 2 services. I think I got this wrong. I think what I wanted was description on this one, because Clear actually has a description of clear sky. So I think I would probably want to go in and make that change to, well, I'm pulling weather main. I think now I got to open up the Word doc again to be sure I have the data structure correct. It's always good to pull this data structure back so that you can actually see what it is that you're doing here. Rats. Download the copy, reopen it. Oh, I'd already downloaded it. All I had to do was open it. I think it is called description. It is called description. So instead of going to main, which is pulling clear, I could just pull description in that business value. So if we go back to current weather JSON and we change main to description, and let's test it real quick. 92111 and test REST call, and it pulls that, and there we go, description, clear sky. That's exactly what I wanted to see. So we'll just hit OK and we'll save that. And now when we go back to our form and we go 92, that's JSON 92112, because we've got to change the value. There we go. Now I get clear sky. So they both match with the conditions. I think it is kind of interesting that if you do both of these, there we go. They're updated very often. And so sometimes there's a difference between these two, depending on where you run them. But currently, we're cool. Anyway, back to that convert to CSV thing. We're going to go to this folder right here where all of my source data is. And I'm just going to click convert to CSV. And nothing very impressive occurred here that we can see, other than, I don't know if you noticed it, but this popped in. If I actually click on REST data again, I have test.csv, which I can actually open up in Excel, since it's a CSV file. And by golly, that is all of my data from the business value. Now, it only returns one record for one zip code, so there's only one row of data. But there you go. I can now convert that JSON into a direct CSV file. So if I was returning more data, obviously I would have more rows of data to return to view in our CSV file. All right, we're done. We made it all the way through, and we're getting done 3 minutes early. So very efficient webinar from my perspective. Have a great week. We will talk to you again next week. So long.